The public session is open. So just should start with the advice that the committee meeting will be recorded and broadcast throughout Parliament buildings and online today. And for anyone in the public gallery, you're welcome to use mobile devices, but as long as they're in airplane mode and on mute. The Assembly Wi-Fi is available for use, and there should be details there on how to log on to that. And I should add, it's not permitted to take photographs or record any of the proceedings today. So we'll just take apologies first. So we've had apologies from David Brooks and Cathy Mason. And I think Deputy Chair advised may need to leave early, so that's just to note that at this stage as well. Going through the pack, I just checked there's no other apologies from any other members? No, that's grand. Item 2 then is just the committee composition, which you've all got in front of you there. So quite a few new members on there, so you're all very welcome, and obviously myself in that category, very much a new member to both the Assembly and in the role. So I'm just going to begin, Deputy Chairperson, members, to formally, publicly welcome you to the first sitting of the Education Committee in this mandate. And I'm genuinely delighted and honoured to have been appointed chair of the committee, and I really am looking forward to working with you all over the course of the mandate. Conscious it's Valentine's Day, I can't promise there'll be too much in the way of romance, but hopefully a constructive first sitting of the committee is something we can aim for. I would like to just put public thanks on record to the clerk and her team for your support in the last few days. It really does take a huge amount of work to get a committee session prepared and ready to go. They've done that in very, very short order, and also I think having a new chair in post with thousands of questions, I think I do want to put my thanks on the record. And look, all of us around the table, we're coming from very different backgrounds and different political outlooks and persuasions. But it's clear that every single one of us will have connections to the education system, and every single one of us serves our constituents for whom education is a critical public service. And I hope that we can all approach our work over the course of the mandate with the shared aim to first and foremost, and I want to make this really clear from my perspective at the start, first and foremost to support our children and young people. And that's who the system is meant to be serving, and I think that's who the committee should have as their focus, as who we want to serve in our work here. And I think secondly, I would add to support our educational workforce across the board to help them deliver the best education possible in our schools. Obviously, we have a role to robustly hold the Minister and Department to account, and I'm sure we are all ready to engage in that work, and also to support the Department when they are delivering on the progressive change and reform that is needed. That we're of course going to have our differences over the course of the mandate, I'm sure, on a range of issues, but I hope we can maintain a very clear focus on delivering the very best education system possible for everyone in Northern Ireland. So look, in that spirit, we do have a fair bit to get through. I don't want to do too much in terms of the intros, but I think it would be good for everybody around the table to have the opportunity to give a brief introduction and to maybe just confirm just your name, constituency that you represent, and a little bit maybe of what your key priorities in the educational space would be over the course of the mandate. So I'll just start with the Deputy Chair and we'll move round the table from there.
Thank you, Chair, and congratulations on your appointment as Chair of the Committee. I was on the previous Education Committee, so I'm an MLA for West Belfast. I've been in the Assembly since 2010. I think one of my main priorities moving forward in this committee will be the issue of educational underachievement. All the evidence suggests that we have the longest tail of educational underachievement on these islands, and some would argue even in the whole of Western Europe. So I was slightly perturbed to see the report of the independent review panel saying that they found no evidence of educational underachievement. So I think as we move ahead in this committee that we need to dig a bit deeper into that and find where the truth actually lies. I also have a big interest in Irish medium education, and I suppose I should declare an interest that my three children have gone through the Irish medium sector. So I'll leave it there, thanks.
Deputy Chair.
Move on to me. West Belfast as well. I'm only in the chamber. I was Belfast City Councillor, former mayor, really looking forward to this committee. Really want to focus as much attention as I can to be the voice for families and children with special educational needs. How we can improve and give equality to every child going through school life. So that'll be a top priority for myself.
Dominic?
Kate Nichol, Alliance MLA for South Belfast. I'm also my party's early years and childcare spokesperson, and I'm really passionate about childcare reform, so that will be a key priority of mine, but also special educational needs as well. So really looking forward to working with all of you.
Yep, I'm Cara Hunter, SDLP representative for the East Derry constituency, and I'm also my party's new education, children and young people spokesperson. For me, I think I'm well aware of the challenges currently facing education, the difficulties with things like funding, and definitely I think all of us know, talking to parents, the challenges facing children with special educational needs, but I also think there's real opportunities looking at Irish medium education and having the conversation around integration as well, and I welcome some new faces around this table and looking forward to working with you all.
Hi guys, very excited to be here, and congratulations obviously on chair as well. My name's Cheryl Brownlee and I'm the East Antrim MLA for East Antrim for the Democratic Unionist Party. For me, education is a fundamental pillar, and it's something I'm extremely interested in, particularly from the Assembly point of view. Previously coming from a council perspective, special educational needs support is something I believe that we should be treating as a priority, as well as childcare. For me, mental health as well in the educational realm is something that I believe that we can do a lot more with. I know a lot more children are suffering in terms of their mental health and how we can support them in that educational setting. So it's something I want to do and deliver on moving forward. Thank
you, Chair. I'd just like to echo Cheryl's comments and welcome you as the new chair, and a serious upgrade on the former chair, Chris Little. I had the pleasure, I suppose, of working with Chris, and so did Pat. I think the Education Committee in the previous iteration actually batted quite strongly. I think you'll agree, Pat. We did work collectively. We had our disagreements, but actually, and Chris was a good chair, and he was a good mentor for yourself, I think. And I think we can do good work in here. Welcome everybody else, and I've got to know some of you, and I'm pretty excited about what this committee could do. But there are some items probably off the previous committee that is some unfinished business. I am reasonably excited in that we have 3 years perhaps of this mandate left. I wish we had 5. But we've only 3, but 3 is better than 2. And I hope that what we see genuinely going forward for the children of Northern Ireland is no more political vetoes being exercised, and that we can be transformational in terms of education, because there is an underinvestment, but there's an underinvestment in terms of political will too. I echo what, in regard to what Pat said about I call it the disparity in educational achievement, because there are those who perform better in some schools or are turning out kids based on grades, but the independent review did point to a direction that perhaps we can look into as a committee. SEN, the previous committee, I think that's the piece that we really need to pick up on, and it's not just about support now, it's about the outcomes for those children in future life, and that's a legacy point that we'd like to pick up on. And particularly for me, again, I will speak about I'd like to see looked after children again becoming another part of our community, and newcomer children as well, because we need to value every child regardless of their background, and I'm really delighted that Cheryl has picked up on the mental health and wellbeing piece. And this is the last piece to finish on. Young people have consistently told us their number one priority is their mental health and wellbeing, and if we're not, as an education committee, representing our pupils and students, then we're not really fit for purpose. So thank you, Chair.
Thank you, and thank you all for your kind words, welcoming me into the role. I think in terms of all of those priority issues that have been highlighted, hopefully we can pick up on those when we get to forward work planning later in the agenda. But certainly, I think every single one there that has been mentioned, I'm very keen to take forward. And I think the point that Robbie has made there in relation to SEN is one that I would just want to really hone in on. We need to make sure that we're getting things right, and I hope that this committee can take that as a genuine priority. I want to put that down as a clear marker from the start, both in terms of what we need to do right now to support those children and young people who are in need of placements and appropriate support now, but also that wider transformational piece, so that we are not year on year in a bit of an unseemly rush to find placements which may or may not be appropriate for those children. We need to make sure we are getting this right for those children now and into the long term. And I'd be very keen to have the department in as quickly as possible on that issue. I want to be very clear on that. So look, thank you everybody. I think we've got a committee here of people who genuinely care about the issues and are going to be genuinely engaged in the issue, so that really does set us up for success. So I hope that we can have a really constructive meeting today, and I hope in our forward work planning session we can really start to nail down those issues of priority. The only other bit from me at this stage in terms of chairperson's business is just we have had sort of an informal approach, but I think possibly now formally through the clerk from the Minister to say he would be keen to meet with myself and the Deputy Chair, really just to hear the committee's perspective on sort of likely priorities, and also for him to set out some of the areas he's keen to prioritise in his work. So if the committee's in agreement, I'd be very happy to take that invitation up on behalf of the committee.
Yeah, I'm going to just further on that. I think previously, to be fair to the former Minister, Peter Weir, he did make reasonable efforts to attend the committee, and whilst it was in a difficult time with COVID and stuff, what would be useful is if the Minister does front up in terms of his commitment to presenting to the committee on a reasonably regular basis, not to interfere with the transformational work that needs to go on. But this will work better if we have open dialogue and open conversations with the Minister. So happy with your suggestion, but with the caveat that we would be encouraging, and as often as useful, we could get him here.
Very much so, and I think obviously you referenced the previous Minister. I think we were in a very unusual footing in that mandate with the COVID crisis, and probably the Minister was reporting on a sort of crisis management mode on a fairly regular basis. Hopefully we're not in that scenario here, but no, agreed, and I hope that all members will be on the same page that good and regular meaningful engagement with the Minister is vital for the committee's work. Okay, that's everything from me at this stage. So if I can just get members' agreement to go into private session, we do have a bit of the technical stuff to go through here for the first meeting. So if everyone's agreed, we'll move into private session.
Right, John.
Good.
Thank you.
Committee Room 29. Sound. Committee Room 29. Sound. Committee Room 29. Sound. Sound.
Yes, next.
Would you like to bring the...
I wonder, should we do the subordinate legislation first, just because Angela's goes there for time?
Yeah, it's just in terms of the teachers' pensions. Again, with my wife, I need to declare that.
Okay. Yes.
So we can do it very quickly, yeah.
Okay.
Okay, so sorry about that. We're conscious that Angela Kelly, the examiner statutory rules, is here and is very tight for time. So we will get through declarations of interest as quickly as we possibly can here. So I would just...
Open? Yes,
yeah, we are.
thank
No,
you.
we've had the nod, yeah.
Great stuff.
So just refer members to the briefing paper from the committee clerk at page 257. Just to remind that all Assembly members are required to register relevant financial and other interests in the Register of Members' Interests. Details of registered interests are published on the Assembly website. And I would remind members that in addition to this requirement, Standing Order 69.5 states that a member who has a financial interest or a relevant interest in any matter must declare that interest before taking part in any proceedings of the Assembly relating to that matter. In particular, there is a requirement to declare any interest which might reasonably be thought by others to influence the member's approach to the matter under consideration. And I just would highlight that proceedings of the Assembly include meetings of the committee. So, as this is the first meeting of the committee, members should ensure that any financial or other interests which relate to the remit of the Education Committee or which are likely to be relevant to a substantial part of its work are drawn to the committee's attention. So we probably do need to do that now, as failure to do so can be an offence under Section 43 of the Northern Ireland Act 1998. So just to focus minds on that. So I will just very quickly go through a couple of interests that I need to declare. So I need to declare that my wife is a teacher in a grant maintained integrated primary, and obviously with the item coming up around teachers' pensions, it's important that I declare that, and also that I am a governor on a local controlled primary school. So does anyone else have any declarations they need to make, Robbie?
Yeah, I have a couple. I'm on the Board of Governors at a primary school in Lisburn at the moment. I'm also an officer in a uniformed organisation, the Boys Brigade, and therefore in terms of youth services, that's an issue. And then it's not a direct conflict, but as a former firefighter, I'm impacted potentially by the McLeod judgment. So I know we have no decision necessarily to make on the reserved matter. It's still just want to put it down. Thank you.
Yes, I'm on the Board of Governors of an integrated primary school.
Else?
My wife, Ruth Brooks, is a governor of Grosvenor Grammar.
Okay. So the clerk will record any declaration of interests made by members in the minutes of the first meeting. And I have to remind members that the rules governing the registration and declaration of interest are contained in the Code of Conduct and Guide to the Rules relating to the conduct of members, and that further advice and guidance is available from the Clerk of Standards, room 254 in Parliament Buildings. Okay. So that moves us on to item 7 on the agenda, which is treatment of subordinate legislation. And Clerk, do keep me right on this, as this is my first run out on subordinate legislation. So if there's anything that I miss, do feel free to come in. I am reliably informed that the Education Committee tends to consider a relatively small number of statutory rules or subordinate legislation, and there is a briefing paper from the clerk at page 260 in your packs, and there's also guidance on the consideration of statutory rules at page 264 in your packs, so I would encourage members to read those, and just to ask members at this stage, however, just to formally note those items. Okay. So the Assembly's Examiner of Statutory Rules undertakes the technical scrutiny of subordinate legislation, and that leaves the policy scrutiny of subordinate legislation to the committee. And the Examiner, Angela Kelly, is very welcome, is here with us today, and she will brief the committee on her report today and on her role in more detail at the next meeting. So the first action just in relation to this is the delegation of technical scrutiny to the Examiner of Statutory Rules, and there is a motion that formally needs to be put to the committee to facilitate that. So I'll just read the motion, and then hopefully we can all agree that. So the motion for the committee is that the Committee for Education, under Standing Order 43, resolves to delegate to the Examiner of Statutory Rules the technical scrutiny of statutory rules referred to the committee under the above-mentioned standing order. The committee further resolves that in carrying out this function, the Examiner shall be authorised to report her technical findings on each statutory rule to the Assembly and to the relevant department, as well as to the committee itself, and to publish her report. Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Thank you. So we're going into item 8 then, in closed session.
Yeah, so we do have departmental officials outside who are going to brief on 2 statutory rules that have been laid in the Assembly, but as Angela is visiting all of the committees today, she can quickly go into closed session with us now and give us a report on those in advance, if that's okay, everybody. So it's a slight change to the agenda, the order.
So committee agreed, very briefly go into closed session.
Great.
Committee Room 29. Sound.
Pension.
There's a bit of a delay with this. Okay, so that's us moved into public session. So we are going to, we've taken things in a slightly different order, but we are now on item 8 on the agenda, which is the first of the statutory rules that we'll be looking at, and that is for the Teachers' Pension Scheme Remediable Service Regulations Northern Ireland 2023. So you should all have a briefing paper in your pack in relation to this. And at this stage, I would like to welcome from the Department of Education, Mr. Brian Quinn, Head of Teachers' Pay and Pensions Team, and Mr. Bill Bradley, also of the Teachers' Pay and Pension Team.
Just take a seat there.
Okay, so that's page 9 of tabled papers, members.
Did you say table papers?
Page 9 of the tabled papers. So the second pack that you received.
So good afternoon, and thank you for joining us today. So we'll be asking you maybe to take 10 minutes to make opening statement in relation to the statutory regulation before us, and then members will have the opportunity to ask questions. So happy to hand over to you.
Okay, thank you, Chair, for the opportunity to provide an update on the Teachers' Pension Scheme Remedial Service Regulations Northern Ireland 2023. By way of introduction, I am Brian Quinn, Head of Teachers' Pay and Pensions Team in the Department of Education. I'm accompanied by Bill Bradley from our Pensions Policy and Legislation Team. The regulations before the committee relate to the retrospective part of what has come to be known as the McLeod Remedy for Northern Ireland Teachers' Pension Scheme. Similar actions are being taken by all the other public service pension schemes. In April 2015, following the Hutton Review of Public Service Pensions, new pension schemes were introduced for each of the public service workforces. The reforms were implemented by regulations made under the Public Service Pensions Act Northern Ireland 2014. As part of the 2015 reforms, those within 10 years of retirement remained on their legacy pension schemes. This transitional protection wasn't a recommendation of the Hutton report, but was agreed following discussions with member representatives on a UK-wide basis. In December 2018, the Court of Appeal found in the McLeod judgment that the transitional protection unlawfully discriminated against younger members of the judicial and firefighters' pension schemes, and also gave rise to indirect sex and race discrimination. The Supreme Court denied the government permission to appeal the Court of Appeal's judgment. On the 15th of July 2019, the Chief Secretary to the Treasury made a written statement that set out that the GB government considered that the Court of Appeal's judgment had implications for all public service pension schemes and planned to come forward with proposals to remedy the discrimination across all schemes. Legal advice confirms that identical transitional measures introduced for equivalent devolved schemes must be similarly rectified. Following a consultation run by the Department of Finance, it was confirmed that legacy schemes would close on the 31st of March 2022, and that effective members would be given a choice of which pension benefits they wish to receive for the period from the 1st of April 2015 to the 31st of March 2022, when these benefits are paid. The choice of pension benefits when the pension becomes payable is referred to as a deferred choice. The GB government brought forward the necessary primary legislation, the Public Service Pensions and Judicial Offices Act, which received royal assent on the 10th of March 2022. The provisions of the Act are extended to Northern Ireland by means of a legislative consent motion. The Act puts in place a framework to address the discrimination identified by the Court of Appeal, both retrospectively and prospectively. And departments have been required to make new pension scheme regulations to implement the remedy. The prospective requirements of the remedy were met for Northern Ireland Teachers' Pension Scheme through the Teachers' Pension Scheme Amendment Regulations Northern Ireland 2022, which took effect from the 1st of April 2022 and ensured the closure of the legacy 1998 scheme, the final salary scheme as was, to future accrual, and moved all active members to the reformed 2015 career average scheme with effect from that date. The legislation that's before you, the Teachers' Pension Scheme Remedial Service Regulations Northern Ireland 2023, gives effect to the retrospective elements of the remedy for eligible Northern Ireland Teachers' Pension Scheme members. That is, those who were in the legacy scheme on or before the 31st of March 2012, when pension reforms were announced, and who continued in pensionable service at some point during the remedy period between April 2015 and March 2022. This is the period during which the members were found to have been treated differently by the courts, and it's therefore that group that is affected by the McLeod remedy. The regulations include provision to allow eligible members to make a choice about which set of benefits they wish to take for the remedy period of service, either the legacy final salary scheme or the reformed career average scheme, and provisions to roll back service during the remedy period to the legacy scheme as the default for 2015 to 2022. Also, provision is included for all eligible members to receive a remediable service statement, an RSS, within 18 months of the implementation date of 1st of October 2023. The RSS will include details of the two sets of alternative benefits during the remedy period for the legacy scheme and for the reform scheme. This information will allow members to make an informed choice as to the option selected for the remedy period. A period of consultation on the regulations took place between April and June 2023. The consultation document was published on the Department's website, and stakeholders were notified in accordance with Section 21 of the Public Service Pensions Act, Northern Ireland 2014. The Department received 12 responses to the consultation, 5 from individuals, 5 from teaching unions, 1 from a representative body, and 1 from an employer organisation. Respondents broadly agreed that the proposed regulations achieved the stated policy aims as outlined in the consultation document. Most of the comments and queries from respondents centred on 3 key things. Firstly, the complexity of the regulations. Secondly, the timing and deadline for decision making. And finally, the policy on scheme flexibilities during the remedy period. The Department has addressed all the relevant comments in the consultation response document, and the Department's full consultation response is available on the DE website. The Department acknowledges this is a very complex area, and we will continue to provide clear information and resources such as calculators to affected members via direct communication and through the website to aid member understanding in such a complex area and to assist them to make informed decisions about their pensions. A small number of additional provisions were included in the final regulations after the consultation. That's because of ongoing discussions across the affected schemes to ensure that the policy approach required is achieved by the regulations. The additions do not alter the proposed policy approach outlined in the consultation and are minor and technical in nature. The statutory rule has been made by the Department in exercise of the powers conferred by the Public Service Pensions Act, Northern Ireland 2014, and the Westminster Public Service Pensions and Judicial Offices Act 2022. The rule is subject to the negative resolution process coming into force on the 1st of October 2023, as was required by the Westminster Act. To conclude, I trust the oral briefing provides an overview of the statutory rule, and we're very happy to take any questions from the committee.
Okay, thank you. It's appreciated. It's a very technical area, and thank you for making the journey to brief the committee on that today. I mean, I just have one very quick question. I think you largely covered it in your briefing, but it was just to maybe get a little bit more detail on what exact steps have been taken to ensure that scheme members fully understand the changes that have come into effect. And on the sort of timescales of when they'll be expected to make decisions on that, and is that going to be an ongoing piece of communication as well?
It will be an ongoing piece of communication. We are in the process of dealing with around 7,000 members who have retired during the remedy period from 2015 through to the current stage. So they will become what's known as immediate choice members, so that they will be given a choice over the next year or so as to what benefits they take for the period, and if any changes are needed. At the moment, we're looking at the priority cases of those being ill health retirements and those who have died or the families of those who've died since 2015, both in service and after retirement. The other 20,000 or so members of the scheme who are still active or deferred will get a choice at the point of retirement as to what benefits they will get. We have been in touch already with those who have ill health retirements, and we're going through the process. We've been very careful in dealing with those people to make sure that they're aware that this is a process where it's not a review where they may have the benefits taken off them. It's a review where the worst possible outcome is you will have exactly what you have now. So there will be an ongoing process as we go through. We've been talking to the unions as well to make sure that they're getting the information out. But as we get through to the different groups, we will be communicating fully with them.
Yeah, there's been a wide range of information made available to stakeholders and employers on the DE website. Also guides, videos, infographics. So there's quite a lot of information out there. We've been publicising that as much as possible.
Thank you. I should probably just note we did declarations of interest earlier. I should just register again. My wife is a teacher teaching in Northern Ireland, so is a member of this scheme. Robbie, you were looking to come in?
Thank you, Chair. And I just again re-register. I have an interest in this because I was a firefighter at the time when the FBU first identified this as an issue, and I was one of those people perhaps who was rather younger at the time, and it would have negatively affected. So I'm not fully over the impact on myself from that perspective. However, I just, and first, Bran, if it's okay, I just want to thank you for all the help you've given me over different examples of when teachers have reached out for help on pensions. So I know that you do a good job there. So this will affect different teachers at different points, and some teachers it won't affect. One of the criticisms in the past for teachers has been the inability to reach help either at EA or the department in regard to getting timely information and stuff. In terms of your department then, for ensuring that when someone does need to make a call, and Bran, you know, in the past there are unfortunate circumstances at times when people pass on, and then there's the legacy pension for the surviving spouse. What's the capacity look like in the department to ensure that the help is available in a timely manner and that resolution can be found?
We do have a very high number of phone calls at the moment, so primarily we do try to drive the inquiries via email because the email boxes are always covered, whereas if we have a number of calls coming through, the number of staff available is limited. We also, within the phone operators, have scripts so that, for instance, if somebody is phoning to report a death by a member, the operators will take the details rather than having to ask the person to ring back, and then will provide us with the details so that we can phone them back and get the rest of the details. So we do have a number of issues in terms of communications and getting phone calls answered because the number of phone calls has increased by approximately 4 to 5 times what it was a year and a half ago. That's something that we're working our way through, but we do have some mitigations in place to try and make sure that the people who really need to talk to us can get through, or that we can get back to them as soon as we can.
One final short one, if that's okay. You mentioned that there was a pensions calculator, and someone who, I mean, all of us should be interested in terms of what that calculation looks like. Is the department bound either to not give pensions advice specifically to the circumstance, or is there a system to give?
We do not give advice because we don't have insurance as financial advisors or anything else. Anything that we have with the calculators on the website would say that they're purely advisory, and that when you apply for your pension, a proper calculation will be done. But the calculators are there. They're available for the person and any financial advisor that they wish to involve in their decision making as well.
Sorry, are they directed to? I mean, is it okay should the department then direct people, say it would be good for you to take sound financial advice on this matter? Because for some people it'll be a significant difference. For others, not so much.
It depends on individual circumstances.
Yeah.
I mean, I suppose depending on the age you were at the time the remedy came into place, what salary you're on, how quickly you've progressed through salary. So each individual would have their own circumstances, and I wouldn't like to make any statement that would appear to blanket people.
We will be in contact with all affected members at some point, and there will be a statement, a remediable service statement, which will be issued to all affected members. And that'll go out within 18 months from the legislation coming into force. And that'll set out both options clearly for members, so they'll be able to see which option is best for them.
Thank you, Chair.
Other members, Deputy Chair, did you want to come in on this at all? No. Any other members have any other Questions? No. I suppose just on that, just would ask one final point. Just we had a very quick briefing from the examiner statutory rules earlier. They understand we are in breach of the 21-day rule on this. Can you just give us a little bit of background as to why we're on that?
No, we were within the...
Okay, we received the advice that we were. Okay, we received the advice that you were on this one. Okay, so the department's confident you're not on this one. That's helpful. Thank you. Okay. Doesn't look like there's any further questions. So look, I mean, I want to thank you both for your time. I know you've travelled a considerable distance for that today, so it is very much appreciated.
Thank you.
Before we move on to the next statute rule, can I just check if any members at this stage have any particular issues they wish to raise in relation to that statutory rule? No, that's fine. Okay, on that basis then we'll move on to item 9, which is the next statutory rule that we're going to be looking at. And can you just remind me which page in the tabled papers that's at, Clark? For members, but you should have that in your packs.
Yeah, so there's a research paper giving background on the whole issue of RSE at page 183 of your main pack, and then a briefing paper from the department at page 57 of tabled papers.
Thank you. Yeah, that's fine. So this relates to the curriculum circumstances in which a pupil may be excused from sexual and reproductive health and rights education regulations, Northern Ireland 2023. So if we could bring in, we have from the department, we have Mr. Ray Caldwell, Director of Curriculum Assessment, Teacher Education and Professional Learning, and his colleague Ms. Andrina Murray, for the head of the curriculum team within the department. Okay, thank you very much for joining us today. We appreciate your time. So, as with the previous item, we'll be looking at maybe 10 minutes to make your opening remarks in relation to this, and that will then be followed by questions from members. So, over to you. Thank you.
Thank you, and good afternoon, everyone. Chair, if you're happy enough, I'll take maybe a few minutes just to set a bit of background to the context of RSE within the curriculum in Northern Ireland, and then move into the changes that were brought in terms of legislation by the Secretary of State in the summer, and then pick up on where we went really from the summer through until January. So in terms of relationships and sexuality education, RSE for short, it's not an area of learning within the Northern Ireland curriculum. Rather, it's included explicitly and implicitly in the Minimum Content Order 2007 under Personal Development and Mutual Understanding, PDMU in the primary curriculum, and the Personal Development strand of Learning for Life and Work at Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4 in the curriculum. In Northern Ireland, the focus is very much on relationships and sexuality education. RSE within the Northern Ireland curriculum is not new. The department first issued guidance to schools in 2001, accompanied by support materials that were produced by the Council for Curriculum Examinations and Assessment, CCEA, providing advice for schools on developing or reviewing an RSE policy. The department issued further guidance in 2013, requiring schools to have an RSE policy. And then moving on to 2011, the Education and Training Inspectorate published an evaluation of RSE in post-primary. The department followed that up in 2014 and published revised guidance in 2015 to schools. So this has been an issue that's being tackled through the curriculum for quite a few years. From 2001, the department has not prescribed the actual content of lessons that need to be delivered to young people in Northern Ireland. The content of the lessons is a matter for individual schools, really exercising that autonomy and flexibility that exists with the Northern Ireland curriculum. Similarly, CCEA have produced resources and support materials that are available to support schools in delivering the RSE curriculum, but schools are free to choose which resources they choose to use in line with their teaching programmes. You'll be familiar with the Gillen Review and recommendations, and the Department has continued to work in addressing those recommendations, most recently bringing forward a progression framework for RSE that was published around April of 2023. Specific to the CEDAW recommendations that are really relevant to this particular piece today, in 2023, in the summer of 2023, on the 5th of June, the Secretary of State for Northern Ireland brought in and brought forward regulations under his powers in Section 9 of the Northern Ireland Executive Formation Act around relationships and sexuality education. Specifically, that was addressing paragraphs 85 and 86 of the CEDAW recommendations, and specifically around education in 86D, and that required the UK government to make age-appropriate, comprehensive and scientifically accurate education on sexual and reproductive health rights, a compulsory curriculum component for adolescents covering early pregnancy prevention and access to abortion, and also monitor its implementation. So the 2023 regulations amended the Northern Ireland Education Northern Ireland Order 2006 and the Minimum Content Order 2007 in respect of learning for life and work at Key Stage 3 and Key Stage 4, making this a specific aspect of the curriculum to be delivered in schools. The regulations also required the Department to make provision by regulation about the circumstances in which, at the request of a parent, a pupil may be excused from receiving the education required to be provided by virtue of Article 5(1)(a) of the Education Northern Ireland Order 2006. So in essence, that required the Department to bring forward regulations and set out the circumstances under which a parent could request to have their child withdrawn or excused from that specific element of the education pertaining to prevention of early pregnancy and access to abortion. So on the 19th of December, the Department led those regulations, and on the 20th of December they were led before the Assembly. They came into effect and operation on the 1st of January 2024. The Department made the regulations, and that also referenced the change to the minimum content order for learning for life and work at Key Stages 3 and 4. The specific circumstances that are outlined in those regulations under which a parent can request to have their child withdrawn from this change introduced by the Secretary of State are for pupils in years 8, 9, 10 and 11, where a parent makes a request for a pupil to be excused, that they have to confirm which elements of education the pupil should be excused from. The specified elements are the prevention of early pregnancy and access to abortion. For pupils in year 12, the circumstances are where a parent makes the request and for the pupil to be excused, and the pupil confirms that they do not object to being excused. The request should be made in writing and addressed to the principal of the grant data school at which the pupil is registered, and identify the pupil to whom the request relates. The request should specify whether it relates to all of Article 5(a) in terms of that education, or if it's relevant to or the request to specific elements of that education, and confirm which elements they are. The parent is not required to provide a reason to the school, and where the circumstances prescribed in the regulations are met, then the pupil will be excused from that aspect or element of the education. So very happy to take any questions that the committee may have. Thank you.
Thank you, and thank you for the presentation, just walking us through some of the history of this and also the statutory rule before us. I mean, I would want to say at the outset that we did welcome the new regulations. We think it is really important. I would certainly be of the view that it is vital that young people are accessing really good quality sexual and reproductive health and rights education. And have a couple of questions that I want to just expand on that, really, because I was always concerned that there was a risk that we would see a blanket option being put in place where parents could withdraw children from what my view would be a very, very important part of their education. So I wanted to ask just specifically, first of all, in relation to children in years 8 to 11, if they do not wish to be excused, but there is a parental request has come in to ask for that, was there any consideration given when putting the statutory rule together as to how the views of children in those year groups would be listened to? Because I think it's vitally important that the voice of the young people who are impacted by these decisions is heard, and I would just be a little concerned that the regulation here doesn't really afford children in that age bracket that space to have their views heard or consulted.
First of all, that element and the change that was brought into the minimum content order, it applies to key stages 3 and key stages 4. Now, the guidance circular that the department issued kind of encourages schools to look at the most age-appropriate time to discuss those aspects with young people, and it's more likely that schools will choose to do that towards the end of key stage 3, year 10, or the end of key stage 4, year 12, but it is actually in the curriculum at key stage 3 and 4. We did, in giving the considerations about bringing in the circumstances, we did consider the views of young people. We consulted with reference groups of young people and we listened to what they had to say, and there was a balance to be struck in balancing the rights of the young person and balancing the rights of the parent and the requirement to introduce the circumstances under which the parent could request to have their child withdrawn. And you'll appreciate that even in the consultation that we took forward from September through to November, of which we had over 13,000 responses, there's a wide variety of views and differences of opinion in relation to these issues. But we felt that there was a balance to be struck in respecting and acknowledging the rights of the young person, acknowledging that the compulsory age of education, compulsory school age, is 16, acknowledging that the age of consent, the legal age of consent, is 16, the rights of the child versus the rights of the parent, and actually that's where the circumstances around the child in year 12 needing to essentially agree with the parent. That does not apply to children below the age of year 12, in other words, approaching age 16. And that would be fairly consistent with approaches taken in other jurisdictions, particularly around these aspects of sex education. And I would stress that in Northern Ireland our emphasis is on healthy relationships and sexuality education as opposed to just delivering sex education.
And if I could just then, thank you for that, the clarification there, just to move on to the issue around then the pupils in year 12, where there is an element that's provided for where the young person would need to confirm they don't object. I think it's framed in a negative way. Can I just check that there is there going to be guidance provided to schools to ensure that there is proactive engagement with that young person to hear their views, or do we wait passively in case they should say they don't wish to take part?
Very much so. The department issued guidance to schools on the 1st of January, and that guidance actually sets out and encourages schools to engage proactively with parents, to share the taught programme from RSE, of which this will be part of what the school is delivering. And really that communication and talking to parents we feel is vital. Talking to young people, listening to the views of young people is also very important. Within the guidance that the department issued to schools, we also encourage, where there is a request for an opt-out, that there is a conversation with the parent and the young people, really to clarify the nature of the content, if you like, of the scientifically specific to this change, the scientifically accurate, age-appropriate aspect to education around access to abortion and also prevention of early pregnancy, but also to talk through and alleviate some of those concerns. I mean, the department has issued in that guidance really a perspective that, you know, the young person, particularly as they move towards the end of compulsory education, it is probably better for them if they experience and hear firsthand the lesson that is being delivered and participate in the conversations that take place, and we would see some risks around them hearing secondhand if they're withdrawn from the lesson. Now, those risks can be mitigated against, and it's not removing the parental right in any respect. They can be mitigated against if the parent is talking to their child and covering these aspects with them. So communication is key. Encouraging communication between the school and the parents and talking to the children, and hopefully that will help alleviate some of those issues that could arise.
Thank you. Have we had any? I think Kate had indicated, and then Robbie.
Thank you. It's really interesting, and I was just curious why parents don't have to provide a reason for withdrawing their children. I think it would be interesting to kind of understand the various reasons, and especially if you are looking at kind of second-hand information being passed on and what's being taught from home, and just to capture that, what was the reasoning for not asking parents to give a reason?
Yeah, well, first of all, it's based on legal advice, and secondly, there's nothing stipulated within the change that was brought in by the Secretary of State to the primary legislation and then brought through in the rule and obviously through the instrument that needed to be included. So it was really working within the parameters that were set down, but that would also be consistent with the approach taken in other jurisdictions, for example in England, where a parent would request to have their child removed from sex education up to 3 months before the child turns 16. The legislation is different across the jurisdiction, so there would be a consistency of approach there.
Thank you, Chair. Thanks, Ray, and I want to thank your office for how you've dealt with what has been perhaps a difficult issue to deal with in Northern Ireland. There's obviously been some mis and disinformation popped out there which hasn't actually made it useful, I think, in terms of trying to deliver something. Some people think this is about RSE when actually RSE has been in place for many years. And actually I think our approach to RSE has been a good one, because we link it to public health, we link it to improving the life and outcomes of our young people. And I think sometimes people look at the United Nations Convention on the Rights of the Child and mix up and think that there's a conflict between children's rights and parental rights, when there's actually not, because the reality is our children develop and mature at different stages. So therefore the parental advocacy is central. It's an article within the UNCRC. So people should really, I think, affirm themselves with that and understand that I think the balance has been struck. Just in terms of then perhaps a question, in terms of that response, I mean, it's perhaps a unique number. I mean, it's over 13,000 responses in that. Is that reflected in the department's decision to do it in the manner that they have? I think it makes sense to me as a parent, as someone who welcomes giving our children information at the appropriate time. Is it something that was did the consultation then inform the development of the guidance?
Very, very much so. So, I mean, there are a number of aspects there. First of all, the department has published the analysis of that consultation, that's available on the department's website, and it did inform the guidance that was put forward to accompany the circumstances under which a parent could request that their child was withdrawn. I think an important element there to highlight as well was the direct engagement with young people through reference groups. So the number of numerical responses to the consultation by young people was numerically small. Now, the department was working to implement this change against a very tight timeline. The Secretary of State brought in the change at the beginning of July. We moved forward to consultation at the beginning of September. The consultation closed at the end of November, and very quickly we then had to move to analyse and bring forward the guidance. So yes, it does reflect. I would also say, and you'll see from reading the analysis, that many of the responses strayed well beyond the issue around the parental opt-out, as we're using for shorthand, or the circumstances under which a parent could request. Now, that information has not been lost. I mean, the work on RSE and considering the guidance that we would bring forward and support materials, that is ongoing. The ETI published a report in 2023 around an evaluation of the preventative curriculum, and it also which also contains RSE, and within that report there were some very strong, quite concerning messages around young people not being consulted on the content and nature of the RSE programme that was being delivered in their school. and also how they maybe, how some sensitive issues were not being developed. So some of the responses that we got, that will inform further work that the department will take forward, but we narrowed clearly the analysis to the specifics around what was required in bringing forward those regulations and also producing the guidance.
It's okay. Just I do appreciate, and I think the department should be very deliberate about this and ensuring that they do capture the voice of the young people. This committee, the previous committee, did one on transfer testing actually, and the responses that we got from young people probably shocked a few people in regard to it. The young people are very well informed and should have that right to having a voice. Then, in terms of then the development of the curriculum piece with CCEA, I believe, and then schools, is that what point are we at with that in terms of the school's ethos and their ability to ensure they deliver it, but in a manner which protects their ethos?
Sure. So within the guidance that we've issued to schools in January, we've clarified that clearly you have the scientifically accurate, age-appropriate aspect of the content of what needs to be delivered, and we've commissioned CCEA to deliver support materials. Now, going back to my opening remarks, you'll recall that the department does not stipulate the exact content of the lesson or the content that the teacher should be delivering, and neither would CCEA. So those support materials are being developed, and they should be ready shortly and published on CCEA's website. Within the circular that the department also issued, we outlined that there is nothing in the change that was brought in by the Secretary of State to prevent the school from continuing to deliver its RSE programme in line with the ethos of the school and based on consultation with young people and with the parents. So that has been clarified through, nor is there anything to prevent. And in fact, from looking at, I guess, the aims of the Northern Ireland curriculum, they promote the social, moral, ethical development of the young person. So talking about moral, ethical and religious aspects associated with this change are very important for young people as well in formulating and arriving at an informed understanding and view on some quite complex issues that will affect them throughout their adult life. Thank you.
Yeah.
Cara, did you want to come in?
Yep, thank you, Chair. Thank you both very much for being here today. And RSE is an issue I think we all care deeply about. I just have a question around, I suppose it's a curriculum-based question. I had the pleasure of attending a lunch at Queen's a few months ago with the SSUNI, talking about looking at the module of Learning for Life and Work, also known as self-development in some schools, and harnessing, sort of looking at that time in their diary and how it could be best used to potentially deliver conversations around RSE, around healthy relationships, recognising abuse, etc. And I'm just curious if you've had any engagement. I know my colleague Mr Butler had just touched on the importance of engagement with young people, so just thought while I have you here, use the opportunity to ask.
Yeah, well, if I maybe talk to the future a little bit and say
Yes,
what developments are going on in this space. So the young people have been very clear with us in the engagements that some have been honest. They look, we don't get any RSE or what they would recognise as RSE. So actually the term RSE and relationships and sexuality education, that is something that we're going to have to work with schools and young people to help them clarify and understand where it is within the curriculum, because there's different delivery models that are used, and again, in talking with the young people, it's not always completely clear where they're receiving these aspects of the education. So some schools, in post-primary in particular, will have discrete provision for the young people. Others will have completely infused provision where the RSE curriculum, if you like, has been mapped across other areas of the curriculum and other subjects. Now, that's actually quite a big ask for a young person then to know, well, what am I going to be taught, and is that going to meet my needs? So within the guidance that was brought forward in January specific to this change, we're encouraging schools to share the taught programme in the fuller guidance that we bring forward later on in the year to really look at the wider issues around RSE and referring back to those recommendations from the Education and Training Inspectorate as well. We will be including through guidance to schools exemplars of good practice in terms of models of delivery for young people, and also exemplars of, look, here are some suggested exemplars of, if you like, RSE curriculum taught programmes that young people are engaging well with. Now, that won't be prescriptive, there'll be examples that are brought together, so that'll be part of that broader piece. But the young people they're very open and honest, and they do metaphorically call it as it is.
Yeah.
I mean, even two of the issues that they've raised with us around talks about puberty, and they were saying, well, in P6 the boys were taken off separately and the girls were taken off separately, and they were saying we should have been, this should have been covered together, and we should have learnt it in year 8 because we need to understand. Now, these were young people around age 15, 16 who were very insightful. They were also very clear that in relation to this specific change, they want the lessons to be provided by the school, and they were very clear with officials that they know they can find it on social media or on the internet, but they don't trust what they might find on social media or on the internet, and they actually want that safety. They trust what their teachers and what the school is going to provide for them. So they were quite insightful, and they were also very clear. I mean, just picking up on Mr. Butler's point from earlier around the parental right piece. The young people are very much in the space that it's their education and it's their right. So that's again something that we tried to balance, and striking that balance between the rights of the parent and the rights of the young people, and where they actually should be one and the same.
Very much, and I share your sentiment there just around how refreshing it is, their honesty and their openness around the topic as well. And I think they can really help shape what we are going to deliver to educate them. And they had a really interesting document, I think it's called Let Us Learn, and just talking about LLW. So thank you very much, Ray. That answered my question.
Can I just maybe pick up a supplementary there? I mean, through the Education and Training Inspectorate's evaluation, there are some recommendations there around learning for life and work, but I think it's important to differentiate between the curriculum content for learning for life and work, which is minimum content, and schools do have that flexibility. It's really the outworking, how that translates into a taught programme and into the lessons that young people receive, and that's the bit where there is a great deal of flexibility and autonomy. So really looking at the taught programmes, and perhaps some of those exemplars, both in terms of delivery models and exemplar programmes, could be helpful for schools in their planning going forward. Thank you.
Any other indications? Anyone else want to come in at all? No? Well, thank you very much for your time on that today. Clark, can I just check in with you in terms of, I know we had a discussion with the examiner earlier just around the timescales. Are we going to be revisiting this next session in terms of if any member had a specific issue?
So should anyone have an issue about this when you've read in and when you've absorbed all the briefing that you got today, the committee will come back to this next week and make a decision about whether it objects to the rule or not. You'll also have more time with the examiner next week, so if you've any more questions for her, you'll get an opportunity to rehearse those. So decision making is not until next week, but if anybody feels now that they might wish to pray against it, it would be good to get an indication of that, so that we can start to get a resolution together, either on a committee basis or an individual basis, because the timing to get to the floor of the House is quite tight. We need to have a resolution, notify the business committee, get it on the order paper before the 4th of March.
That's fine. Well, I'll just put it out to the floor then if any members at this stage wish to comment in relation to this statutory rule. No, but we'll revisit it on the agenda next week for absolute clarity. Okay. Thank you, and thank you very much for your time.
Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you.
All right, so we are going to move on to item 10 on the agenda. And this is the Committee for Education's Legacy Report from 2017 to 22. And at page 332 of the pack, you should have the previous committee's legacy report there for your reference. So the legacy report sets out the key activities, outputs and achievements of the previous committee, and it also highlights a range of issues that it believed that this committee following it may wish to take account of when considering its priorities. So I'm just going to at this stage ask the clerk to speak briefly to that report, and then we can move into specific questions. And I'm conscious that some of this will feed into forward work planning, so we can maybe take it if there's anything in detail that needs to be lifted out of the legacy report. We could maybe take that in more detail at the forward work planning item of the agenda.
Yes. So, members, I did say to you earlier in our committee procedures session that last mandate was unusual. There was essentially a very concentrated 2-year period of work done by the committee, and a lot of that was under pandemic restrictions. So, with unusual features such as, 17 ministerial attendances at committee out of 51 meetings, like that just wouldn't, be usual. Also the fully virtual meetings of the committee, that's not our normal practice either. In the first period, the committee was concerning itself with the experience of young people in school and the all school stakeholders really about the restrictions that were having to be managed in the scholastic environment, and then I'd say a really key point actually was when the mental health interim mental health champion came and spoke to the committee about the sacrifice that young people were making, that they really needed to be with their peer group and they were staying at home for the benefit of everyone else in society. So the committee really took that as a steer to then influence as much as possible the minister and the department in all kinds of ways, briefings and correspondence and products of the committee itself, to make sure that the optimum CAMS was being provided, that as much thought was going into restorative activities afterward for young people as possible, and that kind of thing. And the committee was also very keen to have a lot of youth engagement to make sure that it was hearing firsthand from young people. One of the initiatives that it took forward was a Life and Learning in Lockdown project. So it was a mini inquiry, I suppose. There was an art project that all pupils of all ages could contribute, show the committee their perspective on that time, and then focus groups with younger pupils, meetings of the committee, stakeholder meetings on Zoom with older children, and also the Children's Commissioners Youth Panel, groups like Pure Mental and Crisis Cafe coming to the actual main committee meeting and speaking about their experience, and one young woman appearing from a wood somewhere with her beanie hat speaking to the committee, and so that it was very refreshing youth engagement, and I'm sure that that's something you'll want to think about for this time around as well. So there was that whole pandemic emphasis, and then a lot of legislation came on stream as well in the final year. So some of the outputs now you'll see are to do with that. So today we had actually there's an SR that was led that the department is going to relay shortly, that is an output of the period products bill that the committee coordinated. So that was involving several different departments, and it was a private members bill, and the committee undertook to coordinate that legislation, to write to all of the other departments about their input, and to run the committee stage, so to run an inquiry into the impact on stakeholders of that proposed legislation. So that was a big piece of work, and it now is being implemented by departments as they identify the public bodies that will provide these products, and also in a rollout of an educational measure with it, so that young people, preferably in a co-ed environment, are being given lots of information about menstruation, so that it's destigmatised and that people aren't bullied about that. So, I mean, our legislation that comes to the committee comes from private members' bills. The committee can actually legislate itself, though it didn't last time. And then ministerial legislation is obviously the other source. So the school age bill that the minister put through last time was something that the committee had been involved in quite a bit, and it was done by accelerated passage, which means that the full committee inquiry stage didn't take place, and that was agreed between the Minister and the committee. But the Minister managed to check in with the Chair and Deputy Chair before the amending stages, and the committee's input did have an impact at both of those amending stages. So that was about giving flexibility to parents who just felt their children weren't ready to start school, gave them a little bit of leeway. GTC NI directions was another ministerial bill, and again the committee had a lot of stakeholder engagement with the General Teaching Council. There were a lot of concerns about the governance of that organisation. There were kind of several factions who came and presented to committee, and essentially there was an effectiveness review, and the Minister decided to dissolve the council. So that's what that bill was, and again the Minister engaged a lot with the committee about that. So non-executive bills are bills that don't come from the department, and in the main, as I said, they are private members' bills, and we did have a lot of that work. The integrated education bill being a really big item, which will probably be on your work plan again, because there's an action plan being consulted on at the moment in relation to that. So the committee took a lot of it ran the committee stage, which is at least 30 days, but is usually extended. It took input from 1,118 organisations and individuals, and it was a relatively contentious bill, and the committee considered a lot of evidence and actually had a lot of extra meetings about that. So it was a matter of just the committee stage is an effort to take a snapshot on behalf of the whole Assembly of all of the data, and on balance make decisions as to how the bill should be best amended, and then pass that over for the next stages in the plenary proceedings of the Assembly. And so the committee often took legal advice, often took research briefings, often took update research briefings, just to make that snapshot as vivid as possible. And I guess all of that evidence-based decision making is something that was helpful to the process, having all that objective data. Then there was also a proposal, a private member's bill proposal, about, in that same place actually, that the RSE change has been made in the law. There was a proposal to insert in there into the curriculum CPR and AED. So staying alive. I'm trying to think what those acronyms actually mean. The life-saving skills. So it was proposed that they should be a mandatory part of the Key Stage 3 curriculum, and the private member engaged with the committee about that, but actually the department also was agreed that this should happen. So in the end, the Minister took that on and did that by secondary legislation, and the private member's bill was withdrawn. Period products I have mentioned. Holiday hunger was another private member's bill that was being progressed by a member of the committee, and was coming to committee and had a lot of support. But measures initiated by the department meant that actually didn't continue as a private member's bill. But by the end of the mandate, then the funding was unfortunately in doubt. Then in terms of secondary legislation, the committee agreed the CPR and AED material when it came, and there was also teachers' pensions secondary legislation. So the committee took some motions to plenary, one about post-primary transfer testing, one about the adverse impact of the pandemic on access to special educational needs, and one on restrictive intervention and seclusion of children and young people in additional support need. So the committee took a thematic approach quite often, having stakeholders come to speak about a particular topic, and then having the departmental or arm's length bodies, officials responding on the policy area on the same day or maybe subsequent days. And the committee commissioned a lot of research, some really quite interesting research, and those are available on the committee webpage. So things like academic selection, children's rights and educational policy, restraint and seclusion, gender budgeting and gender inequalities. That's a way of looking at public sector budgets and seeing, are there any systemic impediments to equality in education on the basis of gender. And I guess the period products bill is an example of how, the state intervenes to try to make sure that young women or people who menstruate aren't going to miss school, aren't going to be held back in their academic achievement. That's an example. Also, measures to help young men who are having difficulties just generally with academic achievement. Those would be gender budgeting initiatives. Then SEN, special educational needs, of course, school starting age, physical activity and the well-being of children and young people. I mean, actually really low, disappointingly low in the view of the last committee. Something you might want to check in on again. School uniforms cost, gender and behavioural considerations, so that was quite interesting. The role of sleep in adolescent health and well-being. A lot of young people are not functioning until 11 o'clock, and it's really unfair of us to expect them to. So those were some of the newcomer pupils and investment strategy. Those were some of the research papers, and that's something that the committee might want to considers it as it meets stakeholders and considers its work programme as well, what it could commission. A lot of stakeholder events as well, quite a lot of youth engagement in those stakeholder events. There's a list, it's quite long, and a lot of those people came to informal meetings or the main meeting or like a speed dating event or a Zoom. So the committee was trying to use various different tools to engage and make sure that its interventions were very relevant. No external visits. We didn't get out at all. Although there were some commitments to go. And then the committee suggested issues for you in the successor committee. And this paragraph actually really probably still stands today. Budget scrutiny. The outgoing committee exited at a time of extreme budgetary uncertainty. A pattern of underfunding of education has become long entrenched, and at the time of writing, even initiatives such as the Fair Start programme to tackle systemic underachievement and the review of education were under funding threat. Workforce planning, including a review of arrangements for substitute teachers and education welfare officers, is an equally urgent matter in the resourcing of the education system. The committee commissioned a research paper on DE's budget and put questions about this. The successor committee may wish to reprise this material early in the new mandate. So there are some dates, I guess, when the budget process requires that the committee receives updates from departmental officials. But we will try to have budget briefings early as well. And the committee's induction programme will have assistance from the research function to just give members tools to interrogate that information effectively. And
Rob was just looking to come in.
Beg your pardon?
Yeah, just on that, if you don't mind, I think the finance minister is the debate on Monday is the budget bill, the introduction of the budget bill. So it'd be pretty important that we do, especially for new members, but even for me for a refresh just to get over.
Yeah, so that's just up until the end of this financial year. So there's not a lot of influence that can be brought to bear, I guess, on that one at this point. But yes, you're right, and we'll try to get a briefing paper to you to prepare you for that.
Thank you.
So I'm conscious I don't want to take up too much time. This issue 2 was the comprehensive childcare strategy. Already in your first week you've had a motion about that. Issue 3, emotional health and well-being. issue 4, the 14 to 19 strategy. We didn't end up having a meeting about that. We had arranged one with the Department of the Economy, and since then a framework has been issued, so that might be interesting. PE in schools, relationship and sexuality education, SEN, and green recovery. The committee did communicate with the department several times about a Green New Deal and never received any response to that correspondence. The newcomer pupils as well was also flagged up. So that gives you something to think about in forward work planning. Yeah.
No, that's really helpful. Thank you. I'm conscious we'll cover a lot of this in forward work planning, and time is getting away from us. Does anyone have anything they want to bring in at this stage around the legacy report? No, that's fine. So there is just a little bit of sort of technical business just to get through in relation to unpublished papers from the Legacy Committee. So the predecessor committee considered a wide range of relevant issues and obtained a large number of related papers, most of which are unpublished, and they may be useful to inform deliberations for this committee. If you want access, for the committee to be able to access those unpublished papers, we do need a formal resolution to do that. But can I assume at this stage there's no dissent? Everybody would be open to receiving those papers. So on that basis, I put the following motion to the committee: that the Committee for Education agrees to access and publish as appropriate all unpublished papers obtained by the predecessor committee. Is this agreed?
Agreed.
Okay, that's great. Thank you. Okay, so we'll move on to item 11, correspondence, and I would tend to take this quite quickly because there's a lot of correspondence there, given how long we've known the action. There's a lot of material that's built up. So you'll see there's a summary note in your packs at page 366. But what we've done here is I'm just going to draw out a couple of bits of correspondence that would require a direction from the committee in terms of how we respond, and then unless there's anything else on that list that any other members would want to highlight, we can note the rest of that correspondence. So item 11.2, first of all, page 374, is the summary of departmental decisions made in the absence of a minister. And decisions were made in May, August and September of 2023. I would suggest that the committee write to the department simply to seek confirmation that this is a comprehensive record of decisions taken up to the 3rd of February 2024. Is everybody agreed on that?
Agreed.
Okay. And yeah, could I also just check? I mean, appreciate there's a lot in there. Given how long we haven't had a minister sitting, are there any particular items in those decisions that the members would wish to raise any particular issue with at this stage?
If you don't mind, it's just there's an item in there for it's a request by employers for childcare with regard to briefing the group. It just given the nature that it was the first debate in the chamber, just think it would be timely. And
we're coming to that, absolutely.
Yeah.
So we'll come to that, absolutely. I'll just work the ones through that need an action in order, if that's okay, on that one. So 11.25, page 711, it's correspondence from STEAM Education Limited, and it's thanking the previous committee for hosting STEAM NI back in March 22 and inviting the committee to visit one of the schools engaged in their co-teaching work with teachers, engineers and scientists. So given that we are at very early stages here with the committee's work, and we'll probably want to engage with really key crucial stakeholders at this stage, I would wonder if we were happy just to consider that invitation as part of the committee's forward work programme, and to maybe factor that in as a visit down the line if members are agreed with that.
Yeah.
Okay. Item 11.26, page 716, is correspondence from the North Down Primary Principals Group, and they were requesting a meeting with the committee, and that was specifically in relation to incidents of abuse of school staff by parents and carers. Again, conscious this came in back in May 22, not far off a year ago. So would members be content that we write back to that group and maybe ask for them for an update on the current situation, and then we can get a sense from their response if there is further need to engage. Members agreed? Okay, item 11.29, page 721, that's an invitation from the Royal Society of Chemistry to a primary science workshop event at Ulster University's Coleraine campus. Now that is coming up quite soon, that's February the 23rd. I have checked my diary, I'm not available, so I wanted to check if there are any members keen to volunteer to attend that on behalf of the committee, and if not, we can consider that just as part of forward work planning and how we would engage with them in the future.
Geographically.
I'd be happy to go. I would look at my diary.
Happy to attend on behalf of the committee, and you can liaise with the clerk on that. Thank you. That's great. Item 11.3, Robbie, this was the one you were just raising there. So the employers for childcare correspondence, and they're seeking a meeting with the committee on the key findings from the Northern Ireland Childcare Survey 23 and the Tackling Disadvantage Through Childcare. I was going to suggest on this, I think, given that, and I think I'm fairly confident, and if there's any dissent, you can let me know, but given the motion earlier in the week, this is going to be a key issue for the committee going forward, and I would be minded to respond to that by inviting them to attend a formal session of the committee, hopefully maybe at the same time that we could get the department in on the strategy, but I think there's such a key stakeholder, it would be good to do that if everyone's agreed.
I agree with that, Chad. Just to note, in the legacy report and the statutory, not statutory quantities, the stakeholders, the official ones, I note that employers with childcare aren't on that list, so I think it would be useful, given childcare is going to be a priority, to add them too. But I agree with that.
Are members agreed that we extend an invitation to employers for childcare to present to committee?
Yep.
That's great.
We were talking about invitations, people coming in, just jumping ahead on the agenda, but maybe have, this is the correspondence there from Una Turbot, maybe have Una Turbot or maybe your team come in to give us a wee update on where the EA is sitting for SEN.
Absolutely, and I think when we get to forward work planning, I would say the EA and the particular teams within the EA that we want to bring in absolutely will be on there, so we'd be very happy to cover that when we get to the forward work planning. Absolutely. Okay, again, appreciate we have got a big backlog to get through here, so I'm just trying to get through this as quickly as I can. Item 11.31, page 771, that's correspondence from an individual requesting that the committee ask the Minister of Education if he'll implement and deliver a properly resourced and funded childcare strategy. Are members content, given we had the motion earlier in the week, that we provide that individual with the details of the Minister's response to the motion, and that should clarify the position on that one? Is that agreed? Item 11.32, page 805, correspondence from the Mental Health Champion, seeking the opportunity to brief the committee, and it's my understanding that that invitation has been extended to all committees. I think we've already highlighted early on that mental health and wellbeing for children and young people is going to be a key issue. So on that basis, are we content to schedule in a briefing and invite the Mental Health Champion to present to committee? Are we agreed? And item 11.33, that's page 806, that's correspondence from an individual seeking a meeting with the chairperson as he is interested in international and local politics and as well as a collection of political memorabilia. Are members content that the clerk go back to this individual to thank them for their interest in the committee's work and advise them of the public access arrangements to attend committee, so to maybe make them aware of how they might engage with observing a committee sitting at some stage, if that members be agreed that that's an appropriate response? Okay. Thank you. Item 11.34, page 819, that's correspondence from the Royal College of Speech and Language Therapists, and that came through myself and the Deputy Chair, seeking a meeting with the committee to discuss its early years work. Are members content that we invite them, I think, to an informal meeting of the committee for engagement on that issue? Agreed.
It's really important, that one, because of the waiting list for assessment and the knock-on detrimental effect on our kids, so it's really important we get that one early.
I agree. I think it's absolutely crucial that we hear from them, and I think that's something when we come to discuss SEN and I think many future meetings, I think that link across with health and how we deal with that early identification of need and how the departments can work together collaboratively on that, I think is going to be so important. So it's a really good one to get in early. Absolutely. Okay. So everyone's agreed on that one. The summary note also contains links to the reports received by the committee over the period that the Assembly wasn't sitting, so just would draw your attention to that. Aside from that, there was no other correspondence that I had drawn out that needed a specific action at this stage, but before we sort of agree to move on, are members, is there any other bits of correspondence that members want to raise out of that list that we haven't covered? No? Okay.
Just the individual who's interested in and collecting memorabilia, we can print off an agenda of this first meeting that you can all sign for that person if you would like. I think some of the other committees are going to do
that.
That
might be a nice suggestion, so no, everyone's
okay,
content
so we'll
with
chase
that.
you down.
Yes.
Okay.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, maybe try and get it before we all leave today. So are members content to dispose of the correspondence as per the summary on page 366 with the exceptions of the above ones we've just discussed? All agreed? Yep. Okay. Look, we're on to item 12 now. I'm really conscious of time, and I thank everyone for their patience. That this is a really important part, probably the most important part of the business of the day. So I hope we do get an opportunity to cover it in the detail that it requires. So Clark has kindly put together a draft forward work programme at page 821, but I would want to emphasise it is absolutely a draft, and it is for I'm very clear, it is for the committee to decide how we want to what we want to be focusing on in the weeks ahead. So in terms of that suggested forward work programme, could I just ask Clark if you would speak to that very, very briefly? I think particularly maybe to cover those induction items in terms of the sort of things you would want to cover and how you might want to cover those, and then we'll move into, I hope, quickly hearing members' views on what those the key items on that draft forward work programme we'd want to include.
Okay, so the forward work programme will attempt to get you briefings with the biggest stakeholders early on, so that you can feel your way around the department and the arm's length bodies, but also to then equip you to do budget scrutiny, for instance. There's a lot of accounts of arm's length bodies in the correspondence. The audit office will come in and give you a closed session on how to read those and what the significance is of those in the public financial accountability system. You'll meet some of those scrutiny partners of the Assembly, the audit office being one, and then also the stakeholder list that we tabled today is people who've written to the committee before, engaged with the committee before, and asked to be on that stakeholder list. Also, stakeholders that members have recommended before. So you please do write to me or the team and ask for your other stakeholders to be added to that list so that the committee can engage with them. There will be, I mentioned I think earlier that there'll be a long list of people who'll be coming to informal meetings, but in kind of provisionally trying to prioritise, the chair was thinking that maybe having the unions early on.
Yeah, I think the first two things that I had thought of. I mean, I think it is. I mean, and I'm just going to put it on record. It is disappointing. We don't have a first day written briefing from the department on here. I think that would have been helpful. But I would be very keen if it's possible to facilitate a sort of day one briefing from the department. I think next week if everyone is agreement, I think that would be a helpful first action. But I'm happy to take views, but I would be of the opinion that it is really important that we don't just hear from the department on this, and I would like to get a sense of what the teaching profession, school leaders are saying, and indeed non-teaching staff, and to see if there would be any scope to hear from the unions early on in the committee's work, because very aware there's obviously pay pressures, but huge pressures in relation to the action short of strike, and with the crisis in school budgets, it's incredibly difficult time for teachers to deliver education, so I would be keen to have that on the agenda if the committee was in agreement with that. Happy to hear views on those two as a starter. Deputy Chair, do you want to come in first?
I suppose I agree with what you have just said, and I just looking at this forward work programme, I think you and I are in to meet the Minister next week, is it?
That's the plan,
right,
yeah. I
okay.
don't think we have a date yet, but certainly there was an intention suggested that would be something we could arrange.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And I suppose are we looking for other items or issues to put into the forward work programme now, or are we going to deal with that at a later date?
I mean, I would be keen at this stage to at least have the first few meetings mapped out in terms of what our priorities might be, in terms of who we would have in to hear from.
Yeah, I mean, provisionally, we hope to have the Permanent Secretary and Deputy Secretary next week, and then some of the other senior directors in departments come and give briefings on central tranches of policy, and I've put in there indicatively that the Education Authority might also be one of your early meetings, but it's for you to say, are there particular themes that you want to be addressed and in what order?
Yeah.
So that would just...
Well, I mean, I suppose, the big ticket issues are going to be, teachers' pay, SEN, funding for new builds, and so on. There are other issues such as, and I'd like this clarified from the department, the issue raised earlier about educational underachievement, because my understanding was that the department agreed there was a problem here with educational underachievement. Hence the Fair Start report and the independent review of education. So it'd be interesting to see what the department has to say about that. I also think we need an update on where things are with the integrated education bill and the strategy within that, and also an update on Irish medium, and particularly the lack of supply of teachers, particularly in specialist subjects, the deteriorating state of the accommodation, and the lack of resources that are supplied to Irish medium schools.
I would be very much in agreement with everything that the Deputy Chair's just run through there. And I did have a little bit of a concern. I don't know what other members felt with just how late some of the things were potentially being suggested by the department. I think on SEN to be here in the possibly end of March might be when we expect a briefing, and I would have hoped that we could hear on an issue such as SEN, where I know there's really live active work going on that. I would hope we would be able to hear from that much sooner than the end of March. I don't know if anyone else has a feeling, Kate.
Yeah, Chair, I absolutely agree. My introduction to being an MLA was dealing with crisis kind of in SEN places, and conscious that that's coming down the path, so would like to hear from them as soon as possible. Obviously, the Minister said on Monday that there'll be a paper to the Executive on childcare, so I'd like us to start looking at that as soon as possible as well. And just one other item that I hadn't mentioned but was mentioned in the legacy report is the piece on newcomer children, and we know that there are so many problems there as well, so those are my three kind of priorities.
Just on that point about SEN, we know that the end-to-end review is well established now, so it's not just bringing the department in, it needs to be the department and the EA, because they're joint stakeholders in regards to that, and we can't take our foot off the pedal. There's some brilliant people working in there, however this committee can bring serious value and assistance to that, and with our work with advocacy groups, I think it's something we need to be very alive to. I don't disagree with teachers' pay is important, but it should be sorted out pretty soon. Hopefully, as should classroom assistants, bus drivers and that type of thing. So I think in terms of if we're going to go for that SEN piece very early on, we make sure it's department and EA representatives together, because they will have allocated out throughout their 12 strands,
I think as
the ownership of those.
The end-to-end review, I think, is very much being pitched as a joint piece of work. Yeah. So I think if we ask that team in to present, you would hope but we can specify that the EA should be coming in on that. I don't know if anyone else was at the recent stakeholder event that the department at EA ran. The work is really well developed, so I just see no argument that we should be waiting 6 weeks to hear on that. It seems to me that it's such a key strand of the department's work that's ready to go, so let's hear on it.
Can I make a technical point, if you don't mind? Sorry. In terms of that, the presentation of the forward work plan in that format doesn't work. One, it's out of kilter. And it's not about the technical detail in it, but for us to look at the forward work plan to see what's on it, it kind of needs to be that Outlook calendar where you can see, and then you can do maybe the drop downs. And I know it might not work on this, Evelyn, I don't know in terms of how we get our papers, but that doesn't work for me.
Yeah, it's not ideal. I don't like it either.
Yeah,
so okay, we'll go back and see what we can do with that.
Something that gives us because we're going to repeat conversations, if we can't see it, kind of.
I would agree. It's not particularly easy to navigate. Yeah.
I just wanted to reiterate my support for the mental health champion attending the education committee. I had conversations recently with counsellors who had worked in the Happy Healthy Minds programme and withdrawal of funding there, and I'm just wondering if maybe the department could give us, or the mental health champion, give us a bit of feedback on if there's been any sort of impact assessment on that funding being withdrawn and those services being cut and the impact on our young people.
Yeah.
Would you like that in by correspondence just initially?
I think just to get some kind of clarity. Yeah. Thank you.
Danny?
Yeah, just a couple of things. The importance of saying, like we were in the autism APG yesterday, and health's a big part in this. To play like one in five saying is autism, and the strategy was released just before Christmas there, and it's not great. So we have to work through that as well. So that part, there's a big body of work across all the departments on saying, and another part that comes in there, it's not always talked about, and probably came to all of our doors, was youth provisions as well when it comes to the cuts just recently. So I think that needs to be on the agenda as well, talking about the specifications that come from the Education Authority to our community and voluntary sector who deliver in many of our communities. And that also brings into saying as well, there isn't that much provision out there for children, especially when they go over a certain age bracket as well. So I think that's a body of work for us in the committee.
And I know you're really involved in the youth sector, and you're a big advocate for that. I mean, I'm well aware of some of those issues around the non-statutory providers and the real funding gaps and disparities there between the statutory provisions. So I think hearing from the EA on that would be welcome. I wonder if an EA sort of overview of all of their issues and maybe all of their budget pressures, and then that would give us the opportunity to drill down into all of, because the strands of work within the EA are so broad. Yeah.
Yeah.
Cheryl.
Sorry, just to follow on from Danny's point there. One of the issues that I am seeing continually now within schools is drug use. And I've noticed within the report there's no reference to drugs or PSNI or anything like that. And it may be out of the realms of this committee, but drug use within young people within the school environment is significantly growing, and it's something I have a massive concern about in my area, and particularly the likes of the youth intervention and the youth programmes that are going on are key to that, and key to getting that hook and hopefully helping and supporting people in that time. So again, that'll connect in with your health and well-being as well, but it's something I think is a major priority, and it's a rippling effect that I think we need to start getting a grip on.
Yeah, absolutely, and it crosses over with youth service,
Yeah.
and I think there's a big curriculum crossover there as well in terms of is the drug education that we're rolling out in schools actually, is it fit for purpose, and is it really is it meeting young people where they're at in terms of that issue? So I mean, I think there's space for that to be read across a whole range of areas. So yeah.
And it's even a struggle for the schools and the teachers to deal with, and it's where we can support them and make sure that the structure's in place too.
Anybody else want to come in? So, I mean, if I can maybe summarise what I've heard, and then if I've missed anything. So I think we're definitely in agreement that in terms of the agency we want to be engaging with in the departmental interactions, that we're looking for a day one briefing from the department as a priority, and an agreement that hearing from the teaching unions to get that input from the teaching profession is really crucial early on. Sorry, go ahead.
They have they're confirmed for an informal meeting on the Tuesday, and we're asking them would they be available for the main meeting?
Yeah.
So you might have next week the teaching unions, and then the permanent secretary, and then sometime with the examiner for statutory rules.
Okay, no, that's perfect. In terms of key policy areas within the department, saying coming through loud and clear. We've also got the health and wellbeing piece that has been raised, childcare, and that early education strategy. I think sooner we can hear from that team, the better. And I think it's encouraging to hear that there is an executive paper coming on that. So let's hope that does indicate that there is real proper attention being given to that. And then in terms of other issues, we've got the EA as another key stakeholder that we would like to get in early, and probably a range of directors through as for a first briefing. I think at that stage, I mean, I would imagine after we've done that, we would be wanting to hear from the Minister, if not sooner than that. So I don't know if anyone has a feeling. It'd be good to maybe get a steer from the committee how soon we think it would be beneficial to be seeking attendance from the Minister.
I don't think it would be disrespectful to ask for almost like a first day briefing from the Minister in terms of his intentions, because the longer we go without the Minister being here, the more the department and he will have created their plan, and it becomes a wee bit not academic, but a bit more difficult for us, and we want to be constructive. So I think in terms of getting off on the right foot with the Minister, if we had a meeting which was not too prescriptive, to give the Minister the opportunity to set out his priorities and that, and then we by that stage will have identified a number of key priorities. We could do that, and then I think we could step off from that. I think if we leave it too long, Chair, it won't make for a good start.
I would be in agreement. I think sooner rather than later on that. Obviously there'll be a link across with the department as to when that's possible, but we're happy to do that. Okay. There are a couple other things, and I am conscious that we're getting very clear and close to the end of our time here. In terms of other items on the work plan, there is the member induction aspect to it, and there is also the budget scrutiny. Is the committee happy to take a lead from the clerk on this in terms of the budget scrutiny items that are really crucial to get in early on the forward work plan, that we work to that? And again, on induction, is there anything crucially on that list anybody felt was missing or that we needed to move forward to in terms of actually upskilling members for the work on the committee?
There's no legislation pending, really. Sure, there's nothing for us, because that's a real learning curve.
Maybe on school, there might be a
Possibly
proposal on school uniforms.
Okay.
Yeah,
That might
so
be
the
useful
bill
to do
office-
something in terms of that, because on the committee, just that understanding, which in terms of that collegiate approach, or you can branch off and you can still do your own amendments, like on the integrated education bill, for instance, where I peeled off to try and make it work for us and did a series of amendments, but it was still on the committee, and learning that was really interesting, actually.
Yeah.
Okay. And which also brings me in, there probably is, I think we probably do need to mention, I know Deputy Chair had mentioned Irish medium, there is also the Integrated Education Action Plan, which I think we probably need to have a look at. And I'm also conscious in terms of another big consultation that was run while we didn't have an executive sitting, was around restraint and seclusion, which is a direct read across from the previous committee's work. And I think before we have finalised guidance, I think it might be good to hear from the officials dealing with that consultation, because I know that in some sectors across the health professionals there are some concerns around that draft guidance, and I think it would be good to make sure that we are scrutinising that. So I would be keen to see that on before we get publication of final guidance. Okay. Well, we can revisit this in future committees, but I think that's a good start. That's getting us moving in the right direction. Absolutely. Okay. So are we all agreed that we're happy with that as a broad outline at this stage?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, that's great. Okay, so that moves us on to item 13. Any other business? No. And we'll move then to the final one, which is item 14, date, time and place of next meeting. So that is scheduled Wednesday the 21st of February, 2 p.m. in room 29. So on that basis, are members content that the committee meeting does now adjourn?
Yeah, agreed.
Thank you.
Well done.
I'm going to get my children now.
Committee room 29. Sound. Committee room 29. Sound.